Good evening, Boulder Chorale community. This is Dr. Vicki Berrichter, Artistic Director of the Boulder Chorale. I want to introduce you to one of my very favorite people and performers, the great Holly Meir. Holly is a PBS American Master, so she joins the company of such illustrious figures as Leonard Bernstein, Maya Angelou, Flannery O'Connor, James Baldwin, William de Kooning, you name it. And she definitely belongs in that stellar company. Holly started out as a singer, musical theater singer, and she was on Broadway in Hair. She had her own one-woman show based on her autobiography, Fire in the Rain, Singer in the Storm, which is a fantastic book if you haven't had a chance to read it. And it's just as relevant today as it was when she wrote it in 1990. She started out there, and she was also on television in The Partridge Family and All in the Family, which you can find on YouTube. But then her life took a different turn, and when a record executive told her that there was no submission in her voice, unlike in the voices that he heard of Linda Ronstadt and other women like that, she decided, this is not the way that I want to go. And she became an activist. She became a leader in the women's music movement, a leader in the women's rights movement in general. She has been an advocate for musicians from around the world, and especially musicians from Chile and other places. I think you'll find this excerpt from the conversation fascinating. It was a wide-ranging conversation. At one point, we talked about all of the people in her life that she has known or met, including people like Gloria Steinem and the Dalai Lama. She talked about the role of a chorus in the community. And the excerpt that you're going to see is the beginning of the interview, where she talks about how she found her literal and metaphorical voice. And I think you'll really enjoy it. Thanks for joining us. Spend the first 30 minutes, you guys, or so, talking about the voice, the literal and the metaphorical voice. And I want to start with one of my favorite stories in your autobiography, which is when you were 10 years old. You went to see an A&R art guy. And so that means artists in repertoire. For those of you who don't know, they're people who, in record companies, who scout talent. And so Holly went in as a 10-year-old and sang a very adult song. I think it was like a music theater song or something.
Yeah, something, maybe a standard, sure, for sure.
Yes.
I can't give you anything but love or something, beautiful
Right.
song.
Right. And the A&R guy said to you, well, that's sweet, but you're 10 years old. Do you know any children's songs? And you said, well, yes, but you said, I'm not as young as you think, which I love that so much. And the other story, and I
I
hope.
just want to insert here. He
Yeah.
wanted me to sing something like, does your chewing gum lose its flavor on the bedpost overnight? It was so insulting. It was just, terrible.
That's classic. I don't know what your problem is, but yeah. No, yeah, right. It was insulting, absolutely. But I love that you had the presence of mind as a 10-year-old to say that to him. And then later in life, when you went back to another record company executive, that executive said to you that you would never be, a popular, whatever kind of commercial artist, because there was no element of submission in your voice. And so my question to you is,
That's a true story, by the way.
I sure is.
You can't make this stuff up,
Right. No, you can't. So my question to you is, a lot of people will ask you, how do you stay in this work? How do you, but I want to ask an even more basic question, I think, which is, where does that initial courage and sense of purpose come from? Where do you think you got that, where a 10-year-old could say that to somebody?
Well, first I just hearing you say that, I hadn't thought about this in a long time, but them talking about submission in the voice for pop women singers back then. You were kind of came across as the helpless female, the more sort of Linda Ronstadt, barefoot, or the red hot mama like Bonnie Raitt. This is, of course, among white women. Black women had a completely different set of standards, or Latina women. And much later on, we discovered that Linda Ronstadt and Bonnie Raitt were such great, huge artists that covered the full spectrum of everything. You know, they just take a song and decide how to interpret it, and they're magnificent. But back then, there were these images, and I didn't really feel like I could fit into to any of them. But when you told that story, I thought, well, he wasn't completely wrong about the element of submission part. I have a really hard time singing love songs.
Mm,
There's something about that, whereas you listen to a voice like Dusty Springfield's voice, it's just oozy, loving, all pain and heartbreak or desire or passion, or Chris Williamson's voice. You know, those are voices that just can tear up a love song. I'm not very good at it. I don't have that quality in my voice that works for that. So in hindsight, I guess he wasn't wrong in that respect. But I grew up singing out in the country. I grew up on a farm, and I had a favorite rock that was out on a little mountain, little hill, and I would stand up there and sing all the songs that I was learning on records, the Broadway songs, the standards, the bluesy songs, the Red Hot Mama songs, the all kinds of songs. And I developed a very big voice in the same way you might imagine somebody in the Appalachians, they were doing hollers across the mountains before there were telephones. And so I didn't grow up singing small. And because there was not a small space around me, like a city apartment or some kind of an urban environment with a lot of people in it, and nobody ever had to say, be quiet. There was always a place outside to go and be as big as one wanted to. So it's interesting that I think an early environment had a lot to do with it. Space, just big space. And
you weren't afraid to take up space.
no, because there was so much of it outside. You know, you can't really, I mean, I guess you can, but it's a little more intimidating if you walk out on an urban street and decide to sing at the top of your lungs. It's just that requires a different kind of courage. But mine came more, I think, environmental at first. Then later, I've realized that I never wanted to miss an opportunity when I was singing in social change environments. Like I had heard people say, well, why don't you sing? And they said, well, I have to go to my car and get my guitar. I thought, I will never find myself in that situation. I only want to be in the situation that if I think it's right, I can say yes right then. And that meant learning to sing a cappella. That meant learning to sing without needing a sound system, without needing an instrument, without needing lights or anything, you know, to be able to create sound and to be able to stand on the back of a flatbed truck with a megaphone in the rain to support striking nurses, that I wanted to be able to do that. So
And
you have to have a big voice to do that.
yes. And do you think that that sort of experience fed your courage in general, that you have to speak out, or vice versa? I mean, or is it just interchangeable, do you think?
Hmm. Well, I had some pretty good early teachers, that's for sure. Starting with the records that came into our household.
Mhm.
Um, Odetta and Lena Horne, all the way to Julie Andrews and uh, Leontine Price. These are not small women, not small voices. And
Right.
sometimes when when I was in the first 3 or 4 grades in school, they wanted me to sing soprano because I guess I could, but it wasn't where my voice was. My voice was never a high little girl high voice. that
Yeah.
would lead to believe I was a soprano. In fact, I got nodules on my vocal cords my first year in college because I got cast as the soprano in Guys and Dolls, and it was just inappropriate casting. I couldn't sing that. I didn't have the chops for those high notes. I'll know when my love comes along. No, so anyway, it's I lost my train of thought. I guess ask a different question.
Oh, that's okay.
Don't you love getting old?
It's funny, you covered half the things I was going to ask you already, so that's good. Um, I was curious, you talked about well, let me back up because there's two aspects to what you just said that I want to follow up on. The first is you talk about with those singers like Odetta, Julie Andrews, whoever, as a young singer, and I sure remember doing this as well, mostly with Barbara Streisand and Joni Mitchell. But where you would practice. I think you describe it as sort of trying to feel their singing in your body.
Mhm.
Like what does it feel like to be Edith Piaf, the great French chanteuse, cabaret singer? What does it feel like? And so what did you learn from that experience of copying singers? And also, how would you speak to the chorus tonight who are, yes, individual singers, in a community, but they have to be individual singers first. They have to feel the music, especially, the more difficult thing of something that may not be from their own culture, from our culture or whatever. How do you advise singers to experience that? Does that make sense? Like, how do you live
Yeah,
those
yeah,
songs?
good question. I'll go to the first part first. Yeah, I used to stand in front of the mirror and lip sync to those singers to try to feel their sound because I didn't necessarily know the words or the language or whatever. And I think what I got from that was I learned about diction. I learned the way in which some singers would use vowels and consonants in order to assist them in telling the story, whatever that was. That the vowels could be the violins and the consonants could be the drums, or however they wanted to do that. But I heard them using sound to tell the story. And then I heard the drama. I heard the drama. And there are certain cultures where you have to look deeper for the drama than in others. I mean, some their drama's way out there, and some is like there's some Irish singers that you think at first they're just singing along like this, and they're not, and then you listen closer and you just, oh my gosh, that within that small space where these women were allowed to sing, they are telling you so much. I used to like Dinah Shore and some of those women who were just so kind of, there was a certain behavior that they had to have. But if you listen really closely to her within that restriction, she is saying so much in that small space because she couldn't in that time take up the kind of space that Aretha Franklin could take.
Mm.
So I learned from letting these voices, the Edith Piaf, all the way to the very quiet Joni James. I learned to listen for the theater. I learned to listen to how this story is getting told by these various voices. Judy Henske, I don't know how many of you remember her. She had a very, very deep voice. And she would sing down in here. And Odetta also sang really low. So it taught me not to be afraid of range. That if somebody might say, well, that song's kind of the key is too low for you. And I said, well, who said? I mean, where did that rule come in? And if it was sounding like I was not doing well in that key, then it should go up, but not because it's low. So it's trying to find out what are all the sounds in the voice and when is it appropriate, even if it doesn't sound pristine, to sing high. I'm trying to remember what song it was, but Joe Cocker has a song where his voice cracks kind of in the middle of the song. And a certain kind of producer would have said to him, okay, go back and do it again. Well, smart producers say, no, that's an extraordinary moment. That's a
Yeah.
very emotional moment.
Well, we wouldn't have Billie Holiday without that.
Yeah,
If somebody had constantly been trying to correct her or, mellow tone or whatever they call it.
whatever it was, yeah.
I mean,
And then you have also people like in the jazz world, like I remember hearing a story, John Coltrane was playing and was a new producer or something in the room. And he said, okay, that's great. Let's do it again. And the engineer who was working with him said, why would you do it again? I mean, it's, that's just what he was playing at the moment. You do it again, you'll get a completely different song, not a better one.
yeah.
That it is an improvisation of jazz. So it matters a lot who's listening and who's guiding and who's helping. If you have a manager or you have a band that um, invites you out, gives you all that kind of room to test the waters, and then at that last moment has the courage to bring it in so that it's not just flailing about all over the place, right? But as for the chorus, I feel this about ensembles, that it's very easy to give up responsibility when you're in a group. I've seen it with even people who are 5 or 6 or 7 people in the group. They can walk into the hall and it's up to the manager and the lead singer, and they go to the dressing room and, eat the snacks. But if those members, when it comes time to perform, take responsibility for what they're there for and what they're doing, it's going to be a better show.
Mhm.
So how many people are in your chorus?
We usually average when we're in person about 115.
Whew, that's a lot of people. But if everybody shows up, you'll sound different.
Yeah.
You just sound different without anybody doing anything else except showing up. You'll sound different. And then if on top of that, you bring to the material what you've been practicing, the diction, the articulation, and knowing the story, know what's behind the song. And to have had a discussion and being led by you, Vicki, who has such an incredible kind of wise understanding of what that spectrum can be when working with that many singers, then you can work out something like, I've heard women's choruses do this song Fight Back that I wrote about rape. And it goes, and so you gotta fight back in large numbers, fight back. I can't take any more, fight back. It's that kind of a thing. And I would work with them because they were singing it angry. They were spewing out, and so you gotta fight back. It was just all over the place. And I think it was only about 30 voices, but that was just too much. If a woman is in a situation where she's been experiencing violence, first of all, until her world changes, she has to be very careful. She has to be very careful about where that anger leaks out, or she could get hurt again. Right? So when you take a song, if you cry for the audience instead of withholding the tears, they will cry better when you don't give them the tears. If you withhold the anger, they will feel the anger more. And so we did the song where everybody really pulled it in. And so you gotta fight back in large numbers, fight back, let that feeling come into the voice and into the performance, but not just go blah, 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 mad, mad, mad. And they sounded so much better after they pulled it in.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. And it's kind of that acting idea of finding the opposite. Like
Mm-hmm.
don't play what's the most obvious thing
Right.
on the
In
page.
fact, when you see actors who are supposed to play drunk, it's the ones who are trying not to look drunk. When we're drunk and we're walking down the street, we're trying not to look that way. We're trying to look like we're sober. And if someone plays drunk, it doesn't work nearly as well as if they work really hard at not being drunk. And that's theater. That's acting classes. That's reading books by directors and actors and figuring out what it is that they do to come up with these characters that surprise you all the time. Now, obviously, in a choral arrangement, there's certain things that are set. You can't have 150 people all going off in different directions. But once it's set, then you find, well, how much room do we have within this structure to elevate the story,
Yeah.
to elevate the rhythm of it, to find the percussiveness of it, or the round edges of it, and where can we, just the tiniest thing, like well, I'm trying to just think of a song. Whenever you try to think of a song, there are no songs. I am open, or I am open. You want the vibrato in there, or do you want the line? So it's I am open, or I am open. Oh, it's kind of a sound that has that apple. I have dreamed on this mountain. That's all up front in my nasal, like right there, making my cheeks buzz. And there's no vibrato. Since first I was my mother's daughter. It's flat, it's not actually flat, but it's flat. And then you'll have other songs where you just want it to be all rich and filled with vibrato and motion and dancing sounds. And they're all choices. So many choices.
Yes.
So many choices.
Can you talk a little bit more about one of the things I talk to the chorus about frequently is that idea, and you started to touch on it, of personal responsibility as an individual singer while being in this team community setting. How, because you've done a lot of also, singing with other people. It's, you don't know, you're not always singing by yourself. And you have backup singers and stuff. And can you talk a little bit about that, how to balance that responsibility?
I recently had a wonderful conversation with Rhiannon. For those of you who don't know, she's a jazz singer. She started early on in the so-called women's music world with a group called Alive, which was one of the first all-women jazz bands that happened after World War II. When all the soldiers had been away, women took over the bands. They became the players in the jazz bands, but when the men came home, they were told to go put their instruments in the closet. So Alive was kind of a rebirth after that period of time was coming to an end. And but she's an incredible singer. And she did quite a long stint, I think continues to, in a group called Voicestra that was put together by Bobby McFerrin. And both she and Linda Tillery, as well as a couple other singers, were in that ensemble, all soloists. And there they were standing next to each other, being asked to bring that full tilt solo voice, to really have Linda Tillery be present and Rhiannon be present, but then blend with each other so you couldn't hear or tell either one of them were stepping out. And it takes a lot of work. She said it was really exciting, but to listen so carefully to know, okay, did I just get louder than Linda or softer than him? Am I slipping back? Do I need to come forward? In fact, I remember the first time I sang with Dr. Bernice Johnson Regan, who was the founder of Sweet Honey in the Rock. We were in Tokyo for the annual conference on the ANH bomb. And there was only one slot for artists from the US. So instead of she singing or I singing, we decided to do something together. And I was a little intimidated. She's got a big voice, a lot of knowledge. So we were sitting in this Buddhist temple on these pillows, cross-legged, sitting across from each other. We started to sing. And I was just feeling shy, and I didn't come forward. And she stopped and said, "Wait a minute. My voice is going to come to the middle, and your voice has to meet me in the middle, right smack there. Don't let my voice come any closer to you than the middle. We're just going to sit right there in the middle." And she said, "And if you can't do that, otherwise I might as well sing alone." okay then, and I had a big voice. I knew what to do with it. I had just gotten shy and intimidated. So it's what she often talks about, that coalition or collaboration or any of these kind of things is about knowing what you bring to the table and not being afraid to have it, but also knowing when you don't have to serve the whole plate. You find that balance, and it comes from really learning to listen. And so we've found that place right between, where in that middle. So when you're working with 100 plus voices, you all have to listen to each other and not get distracted by it. And that must be so hard because there's so many of you. You're not only listening to your own voice and making sure your pitch and your theatricality and your emotions are there, but you have somebody on this side, somebody behind you got a section, you got another section, and then you've got the feeling of the whole thing. So I'm not experienced with that, but I don't think it works unless everybody brings what they've got to the table and then really listens. But Vicki, you know so much more about that than I do with multiple voices.
Well, yeah, maybe, but that's a large part of what you've done, is just that, uh, when you talk about, for example, when you first sang with Ronnie Gilbert, that was one of the first times that you felt like, oh, she's matching me, like our voices are so powerful together,
Yeah, I didn't have to be small with her.
you didn't have to be small in any way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No.
Um,
And in a little way, when I sang, for example, with Meg Christian, whose voice I adored, and she was an excellent guitarist and a really fine, fine musician, and our voices sounded nice together, but I always had to pull back.
mhm, mhm. Yeah,
Um, she did a lot with what she had, but vocally, from a volume point of view, it was considerably smaller than mine.
yeah.
So to go from that to working with Ronnie, it was nice. It was also really good for me to sing with Megan, to have to pull it back. They're not mutually exclusive experiences, but they're
Ex
different.
exactly, that's just called having sensitivity to, what you're surrounded with and who you're with. When you talked about, having vocal nodes and losing your voice at one point, that happened to me too when I was, like, 22 or something, and I was doing outdoor theater, and they didn't amplify it correctly, and I was doing these leads, and I lost my voice, and I ended up having to go to New York for training and stuff. And it was when I read about it in the autobiography, it seemed to me like that was as it was for me, such a moment of change for me in terms of the relationship that I had with my voice. And I love what Carolyn Dangler, you went to study with her at the Philadelphia Music Academy during this time. And I want to read this quote from her because it's so wonderful. She said to you, keep singing. It is fine to cry, to feel, to express yourself, but do not crumble. Keep singing. And then this is my favorite part. It is the best time for your voice to grow while you are releasing.
Mm.
Sing, dear, sing. So how
Except it was, sing, dear, sing. This is the best time for you to be doing this.
right, way more dramatic than I read it. And yes, right.
And I'm sitting there weeping, crowd coming down my face, and sing, sing. Um,